that this is a magnanimous moment as it relates to economic policy. From any perspective you can think about it, this is truly a remarkable moment in our time as we start thinking about what truly, from an economic standpoint, is our best interest.
The Bo Knows VO podcast talking about environmental social governance, ESG, with Amy Ryan and Mario Cometti. Amy, can you tell us what firm do you work for? Or what firm are you with, I should say? And how did you come to get involved in this entire concept of ESG and environmental concerns? How did that happen?
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for taking the time to speak with Mario and I. And I will say that my role is with the Schwartz Heslin group. I'm a Senior Vice President of Environmental Social Governance. And how I landed in this spot actually starts in Glens Falls. Growing up in the East End, I was lucky enough to be 2 streets over, to be in Ward 3, and be able to still see the industrial activities of my beautiful hometown, which that's where many of my members of my family worked, and was the big reason why we had food on the table in many instances. And this goes back many generations. And seeing that dynamic, but also being in the community as years went by, the conversation very much shifted to environmental. Right. All of those conversations were very impactful for me as a young kid in Glens Falls, growing up throughout that entire time, seeing the town the way it was, and then in the late 90s, having to make the decision, really, when I want to go to college, what is it that I want to do, and the career. And like many others, the options were limited for me post-college locally, which broke my heart, to be very honest. I'm a North Country girl, and for me to have to leave home was kind of heartbreaking. But what it did, though, was begin an amazing career that took me all throughout the country, the opportunity to collaborate with people from all over the world in projects related to environmental compliance and health and safety responsibilities. And I weaved my way from consulting to government agencies to corporate America, and really kind of understanding the basis of what is it that makes companies want to be a good neighbor from all different perspectives, and what is it that governments want to do for them to be a good neighbor in all different perspectives. And this includes the federal all the way down to the local. Right. And there are dynamics in play with all of that. And I think that was the training grounds, really, for being one of the first environmental social governance professionals within the area.
Wow, so that's a story. I love that.
Thank you.
Mario Cometti. Did I say your name right, by the way? Cometti? Cometti.
Nice Irish name.
Mario, what is your role?
Well, I was a managing partner at a very large law firm. In the last 2 years, I've broken off and have a solo practice because I wanted to be more involved in community engagement and innovative business ideas. I'm very good friends with a professor at the Albany Business School, and he always comes to me with projects and ideas. 5 years ago, he and I launched a major business conference for veteran-owned businesses, and it was a huge success. Right. And so when he explained to me ESG, I immediately recognized it as not only innovative, but the future. It's going to be the new norm. And a lot of times it takes a little while for people to catch up, but there's no doubt in my mind, and Amy will speak in a minute about how, like yesterday, there was major news that makes it for certain that it's going to be, something that's going to have to be addressed by every single business. So, okay. The E and the S and the G stands for environment, sustainability, social, and governance. And basically what it does is it takes a more holistic approach to what I like to call best practices, like what a business should be taken into consideration to be responsible with regard to the environment, responsible with regard to guidance and governance, meaning, how the board of directors are set up, and also how it treats its employees. And until recently, these kind of things weren't rated or, they weren't addressed formally, but now they're tracking them by metrics that are becoming more and more universal. They're not quite there yet. And I think Amy is better suited to talk about that. But what I think this does is it gives a more accurate representation of the not only the present state of a company, but its future viability. Because the whole point of this is to see if a company is addressing not just issues of the environment, but whether they're being proactive in terms of employee relationships, in terms of governing. And it's pretty exciting.
Thank you, Mario, for that. Your story is amazing. So you left the area, but you're kind of in the area now still, obviously.
I came back, yes.
Yeah, you came back. So you come home to come home to roost. How do you say that now? Is that?
Well, I come home to raise a family.
Right, that's it. Roost. Where did I get that from?
That's okay.
Anyway, go ahead, Mario.
Well, one of the things, the reason why I became interested in this is, my skill set isn't anywhere near as much as Amy's, but I feel like I'm very good at seeing what is going to happen in the future and getting the word out.
Yeah.
So, when I met with representatives from UAlbany, it became apparent to me that UAlbany, like many other things, is at the tip of the spear of some innovative ideas. And so, and a lot of people think that, I used to work, I was an attorney for many years in a boutique firm that specialized in representing major healthcare systems and businesses. And I came back to this area because, I actually found it more stimulating here. I actually think, like, for example, in the legal field, they're better attorneys here than I've experienced in the New York City area, because we are much more involved from soup to nuts, like all aspects of the case. And in my experience with the white tip shoe firms in New York City is that they're not really, they don't really have a lot of experience. So anyway, when I heard about this, I'm like, hey, everybody should know that UAlbany is a leader in this.
Okay.
So, and, word got around that Amy's firm had the foresight to hire someone like her who specializes in this. Mm-hmm. And then, we naturally, it was like preaching to the choir both ways, like how important these innovative ideas were. Right. So we want to call attention and make everyone aware that the Capital Region is, in fact, an innovative place. I'm sure we could have a conversation just on startups alone and how the area is.
I've had, just to go on that point, I've had some conversations with a guy named Robert Manasir. You may know who that is.
Yeah, I know Robert.
Yeah, regarding startups. So if you could elaborate a bit on how UAlbany first got involved in this, either one of you, maybe?
Well, the professor, Paul Meising, who's like, is my partner in crime and a lot of these type of public engagement activities. He's been doing it all along. I mean, he's a professor, and some people, one of the biggest misunderstandings I have, and I'm sure Amy would agree with me, is that people, when they hear ESG, they just think of the environment. Mm-hmm. Or they just think of like a subset, but really it's a comprehensive approach to doing business.
Right.
And so, he, Professor Meising teaches the class, and that, whether they called it ESG or something else, it was really about how, benefit in the community and society is not mutually exclusive with profit. In fact, his argument and the whole concept of ESG is that they're not only are they not mutually exclusive, but they actually make a company more profitable and sustainable.
That's right.
So in a way, this was around for many years, and organically grew. And it just seems that Albany was, there are several professors, from what I understand, and several people there that
Right.
are not only aware of that, but are involved in the research.
Okay. So that's the focal point. That's the central point of the whole thing. With regards to an individual business now, I'm trying to word the question right, and I'm still formulating it in my head here.
It's okay.
Because I'm ignorant to a lot of this. It's just our gold mines on this. ESG, you're basically, from a layman's viewpoint, it might be that a company needs to be compliant with how it deals with waste. Am I in the right area or no?
You are, but I would say take a step back.
Okay.
Because environmental social governance is not something that you can just pigeonhole in one piece of your business.
Sure.
It's when you are a business owner, or if you are a leader of a specific space within an organization, everybody realizes that there is a flow to the business cadence.
Right.
Whether it's HR, whether that's management, whether it's finance, whether that's operations. And what environmental social governance does is it takes a look at the business on the health of its ecosystem as a whole. How are different departments working within and amongst each other? What types of policies or conversations may have been had between different departments as it relates to common problems?
Mhm.
Waste, yeah, that's a component of operations. It's a component of that. But at the end of the day, it's about reducing impact. And how is it that you're going to be able to do that as a small business owner? Are there creative ideas that you can work together with maybe your neighbors or partnering businesses to learn more about different waste opportunities? There's so many different strategies that could be sketched. But I think the biggest thing is that so much is being said about ESG, especially as it relates to the market. And it's true, there are $4 trillion, over $4 trillion with a T, dollars being moved around on the international markets right now that really don't have regulatory teeth to how those dollars are used. That's a lot. The SEC has been very busy this week giving guidance on this, and I've been listening to every single word. But when it relates to the small business owner, it's about looking within themselves and going, how can I, as a responsible individual that's doing my business, infuse some of the core responsibilities that are important to me, to the people that I'm hiring, and to the greater community abroad. And that right there is your first step in your ESG journey. And that's something that I truly, truly enjoy facilitating.
Wow. Okay. Go ahead.
Let me use let me give you like a concrete example of how it can be approached from a comprehensive standpoint. All right, first of all, if you're a company and you have regulatory oversight, how do you keep abreast of the changes in the regulations? Do you have, from a governance standpoint, someone whose job it is to keep up on that, right? How are they motivated in order to do that in terms of pay? Are they rewarded even if they call to your attention things that you don't want to hear? And with regard to the environment and waste, is there an opportunity to use the waste in a profitable manner? For example, from what I understand, and Amy might know this example better, there's some companies that like, hey, we're throwing out all these things. we could actually be making money for this because it has value to another company.
In fact,
So,
it's called the reverse logistics, and I'm working with a few companies that are doing that now. So, to Mario's point.
if you set up an ecosystem, like Amy just said, where it encourages everyone to do their job and to look out for all these things, it makes sense. Because if you don't have proper governance, you're not going to have proper oversight of what you're doing, your waste of your company. You might violate the law, and that, that could cost a company millions of dollars.
What kinds of companies are we speaking about?
Everything. Every single company could apply these best practices.
That's why ESG, Chris, is such a groundbreaker. I would suggest SEC's acting director, Allison Herringley, the way that she emphasized ESG in her recent public announcement, and I'll send you the link, it was clear to me from her words, and I was listening very carefully, that this is a magnanimous moment as it relates to economic policy. From any perspective you can think about it, this is truly a remarkable moment in our time as we start thinking about what truly, from an economic standpoint, is our best interest. And just even in 2019, we had 250 corporations publicly state that the corporation is not the most of the best interest of the business, which used to be this redundant statement. It is now the interest of the shareholders and the people that are involved are of the best interest for the corporation. That is that's challenging over 100 years of economic theory.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That's what it sounds like. Sure. Now with this,
and it seems,
go ahead.
Well, it's so once you grasp it, it's easy to understand how it applies to every business. Because our way of measuring businesses right now is antiquated. Like, for example, let's say you're a big company and you want to buy out a small company. Well, the numbers, the cash flow, the traditional ways of valuing that company might be like, hey, that's a great company. But are you aware that they have in place, they don't have their safety rules and regulations in place to properly manufacture whatever they're doing. So they may be sued and may break down production. But if you're only looking at the numbers, you don't see that. Or if there's waste that you're not aware of that they're doing, that's not going to be in the numbers unless you actually look and see, like, hey, are they compliant with federal rules and regulations? Right. So you might buy that company, and then Amy just told me the other day that you're responsible for any environmental problems that you buy from a company, regardless from the government standpoint. So, like, if I'm buying a company and I'm just looking at the books, I'm not really getting a full picture of what I'm buying. It's kind of stunning that people aren't really embracing this more.
Yeah, and just that's, I think, the uniqueness of what my career is that I've spent nearly 2 decades being that individual, creating those metrics that Mario is speaking of, and on behalf of corporations, or assessing those metrics. I was the auditor in the field. I have been on oil rigs. I have ran away from explosions. I've nearly touched live 480 kilovolts switches. You cannot believe the things I've seen in the field and the manufacturing facilities, Triscuits being made, apple juice. It's cool. It's so cool. It was like what was being made every day. Mm-hmm. But to Mario's point, those were all data points in whatever was going on in each of those locations that we had to assess as it related to compliance or does it meet best management practices. For a long time, those numbers really didn't have much major teeth other than under the EPA's hood or OSHA's hood. But because of the significant shift that's happened even in the pandemic itself, it's just triggered an awakening and thinking about, wait, this is a much bigger holistic piece of the puzzle, and we need to step back what do those data points mean? What is that score? Because there is a lot more stories behind those numbers.
I would think, and I have a potential real world scenario that I'd like to run by both of you. Now, this would have some restaurants would be included in this, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
This idea.
Absolutely.
Have you heard of the any restaurants that talk about zero waste?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of my video production clients is a diner, and he's modeling his entire operation after a gigantic farm in Georgia, I think it is, where they have zero waste, and they use every bit of waste that comes off of this farm and it goes back into producing, I don't know, all kinds of other products to basically, so it really is zero waste. So that's, now I'm getting it. See, as a layman, it's like a real world thing, and I can really relate to that at this point. What you're saying is kind of profound, actually.
Oh, well, thank you. But think of it in a way that we've always been thinking of it as a 1/2. But if you think of anything, it's closing the loop. It's just literally closing the positive feedback loop. We need to take care of the other half, or how the EPA loves to say it, cradle to grave.
A lot of businesses are probably employing parts and of this ethos or this, best practices, and they don't know that it's ESG, and who cares as to what the acronym is. It's really the thought behind it. And that business you just spoke of, I can't think of a better example of how that kind of thinking can apply to a restaurant. That's exactly what we're talking.
It's valuable, that valuable selling points for that business. They should be including that in their marketing.
The owner's goal, I do is marketing. I'm his social media guy. His whole goal is to create an economy up here in Queensbury, Glens Falls, Queensbury, and basically employ people and just run it like that place in Georgia. There's a video he showed me that inspired me to want to work with him. So I go in there and I eat my healthy food, and we talk about what the next project with regards to this, and I shoot the videos and we do that. So he's on the way. So this is very topical for sure.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah. Very much so. Mario, if a company is not doing what they're supposed to do you get involved in litigating them to make them do it?
Yeah, most of my experience actually is litigation.
Okay.
They usually call me when the proverbial blank hits the fan.
Yeah.
And through my years of doing that, I've come to recognize, like, oh my gosh, this was so avoidable, and so I always think that litigators they're the toughest attorneys, because you have to think on your feet, and you just got to try and solve a problem after it's already a disaster.
Yeah.
And it's easier to prevent disasters if you're already familiar with them.
Well, some of the lawyers are the ones that can stop disasters before they get worse than they already are, I suppose, right?
I usually found the disasters, and then I'd have to get the attorney, and you're like,
And oftentimes as a litigator, you have to have that very tough conversation with your client saying, hey, it ain't looking good.
Yeah.
Well, the jury hates you, whether it be a company or a person, and I've represented, major companies.
I think at this point, so we've hit a lot of preliminaries with this, I think today, and this is the beginning of a series of talks about this entire concept with the both of you. I'd love to have both of you back at some point and dive deep into some processes, and maybe some, without naming names of anything, maybe some specific examples of how you've had to go in and clean stuff up or whatever you do. And, that kind of thing. I'd love to just have you both on again at some point.
Well, thank you, Chris. We would love that as well. Or I would. I can't speak on behalf of Mario, of course.
But
I love working with Amy, and we're I think, a good team.
It looks like you're cohesive, and you kind of work off each other. But I want some questions that aren't related to this. Amy, what's your favorite movie?
That's so funny. I love My Cousin Vinny. I think it's just really, really funny. But I also love Frozen 2
Oh,
because I have young kids.
my granddaughter, and Elsa, the 4-year-old running around doing that. Mario, what's your favorite movie?
8.5 by Fellini. I'm a big movie buff. So, and I'm Italian, so I have I have a lot of relatives over there, so I just love Fellini.
That's cool.
I will say, Chris, one last thing is that Last of the Mohicans is also a very important movie for me because when I was away from Glens Falls area, I would listen to that soundtrack when I was playing my Pandora station, and it reminded me of home because I really, really missed home. But even though it was shot in North Carolina, the movie, the story, everything.
It was not in North Carolina? I'm so disappointed.
Yeah, but it's okay. The Adirondacks are gorgeous, but it made me remind me of home.
Okay. Interesting. Now, we only have a couple minutes left here on the recording. So, if you had Marty McFly's DeLorean, if you could go back in time and talk to anybody in time, regardless of famous or not famous, who would you go see? Amy.
Oh, I would like to have a chat with Abigail Adams because she was there at the very, very beginning of the foundation of our country. And it's those letters that she was writing to her husband in correspondence during those initial days of how we created ourselves as a country. Because of so many conversations lately about the Constitution, this and that, it just would be interesting to take a look and see what was it like then?
Okay, very good. Mario, same question.
There's so many, and I don't want to give a boring answer like Plato. I really would be very interested, assuming I could even understand him. But because he has had such a huge influence, one can argue the most consequential thinker of all time.
Okay.
But if you're talking about someone who would be more fun, well, I was going to say Abraham Lincoln, but
Jimmy Hendrix is mine.
Go back before he was shot and stop that.
Yeah, exactly. No, but he, I don't know if you saw that movie. I actually went to the opening of that movie, the one recently by I can't believe I can't think of the director, Steven Spielberg.
Right. Yeah.
He was a great storyteller. So there's this scene in the movie, I don't know if you've seen it, where he tells a story and everyone is just focused on him. And he just seems like such a brilliant guy who had a skill of reading the room, like knowing when it's more important to make people laugh and eased, and then when obviously when appropriate, make these grandiose speeches. But I think he would be a fascinating person to meet.
Okay, good. Mario Cometti. Did I say your name right, by the way? Cometti? Cometti.
Nice Irish name.
And Amy Ryan, we will have you back. Thank you very much, and live long and prosper.
Thanks, Chris.